I mean, in teaching, you deal with questions that you hope you will be asked to resolve in practice, but maybe not yet. So that when those questions come in practice, you will be quite ready to tackle them. That's what's so interesting about it. You can prepare. And that doesn't mean that every brief should deal with the future. We just might deal with questions that you think might arise or have already arisen, but you're not necessarily dealing with, or you are dealing with, and then you get to see different points of view. So testing out ideas and the sort of discussions that you have in teaching are so crucial. I think practicing without teaching probably would be a very lonely life. I am Lara Lesmes.
And I'm Fredrik Hellberg, and together we are Space Popular. So we do a bunch of different things. We started by doing architectural competitions. We've done a lot of large buildings, and we've done a lot of interiors, furniture, but we've also been teaching for 8.5 years, both here in London and in Bangkok, Thailand. And we increasingly do exhibitions and speculative projects with collaborations with museums or institutions, and mainly exploring the future of virtual architecture and the future of a virtual environment. And in that regard also the potential future of a virtual civic, or a virtual public space, in what we are referring to as the immersive internet. So unlike the current two-dimensional internet that we operate through computer screens and smartphone devices, we work a lot with convinced by the speculation that very soon we will step in to the internet that we've built, and it will become immersive and therefore architectural. So increasingly we also deal a lot with that. So maybe one quite good way to describe again what we think this is in a very simplistic way is if you imagine the current internet, which we access through these screens, if you imagine that being a very, very detailed map of a continent, which is so detailed that you can know exactly what the weather is like at any given time, and you know the ecosystem, but we have never actually been there. And this moment, which is already started to happen and will happen, we think, in the next 10 to 20 years, is the moment when we first set foot on this continent, when we actually start to be there in the internet for real, hence the immersive internet. And one thing also which is very important, we think, is to not consider this immersive internet or what virtual reality is doing as something revolutionary. It is revolutionary to some degree, but it is exactly the same project that has been going on, we can say electronic media basically, and even electronic media being a part of a bigger project about any form of reproduction of media. But what we now call virtual reality, or what we're referring to as the immersive internet, is a logical and an obvious progression of what's already happening. But of course, the moment when it becomes spatial and immersive, in our view, it becomes of architectural concern. Things will be in a place and not in another place, and you will be in a place and not in other places. Your eyes and your perception will be localized in some form of spatial setting, which means that there will need to be architectural design. And currently that is happening, and if you involve gaming, it's been happening. Much more architecture has been designed for virtual environments than the physical world, even though humans have never built this much physical architecture in the history of humanity, yet even more has been built virtually and actually inhabited, even if you do that through a two-dimensional screen. So when that becomes three-dimensional and inhabitable, then most architectural work will be virtual. So that's why we teach this, and this is why we continue to explore what this might be, where is the tension point, what's the stress moments, where most work needs to be done for this to be done in an interesting way, but also done right, so that the structure on which this whole thing is built is a healthy one, both politically and spatially. Yeah.
You're based in London, but you work around the world. So you work remotely. How do you think this is a way the practice may work in the future? When you are like based in one place, but you work and collaborate with people around the world.
We're really trying to make that possible, and I know it conflicts with certain ideas of how an architect should practice. But I think our current situation with basically all the mediums that we can use to connect with each other opens up for a new form of practice. I mean, being from Spain, it was not a chance for me to go back home, for example, where I might have a wider network, to go back home and practice there, because when I finished there was no jobs. So I think we find a lot of people that is in need of basically expanding their area of practice. Some people is really lucky and they can practice literally like within their region, and that's incredible because you can go to site all the time, you can see how things are developing, you can meet the clients very, very often in person and so on. But I think it has become quite interesting to see how much there is to learn from every project, and how you cannot remain formulaic. You have to adjust and learn from every new context, and that's given the current mediums we have and the ways in which we can communicate. It's actually becoming quite possible. So what we do is that we establish a very strong relationship with a collaborator, and we work very much on this workflow.
Yeah, it is obviously a bit bizarre with this, especially in this age with issues relating to traveling, etc., to build up a practice which is global, but which only has essentially two core people. But it's become almost a bit of a project in its own right, and relating to the medium that allows us to do that, which is also what we're exploring in a lot of our projects.
Yeah.
The fact that, I mean, obviously it's not the first time when an architect who lives in one place builds somewhere else, but doing it in this way potentially has never been possible before, like even a year ago, or even 3-4 years ago, let's say. Before you could rely on the fact that anyone that you might work with has the potential to talk with you immediately or show you something or whatever that is. And it really excites us beyond the fact that we can have a project in Thailand or in Spain or wherever we want, and be relatively present. But also, if this is like this now and it wasn't 5 years ago, what's it going to be like in 5 years or in 10 years? Which is just so mind-blowing to imagine what you might be able to do from a small apartment in a city in Europe or in wherever in the world, and the kind of presence you could potentially have as a collaborator in a project somewhere else in the world, empowered by the media of the next decade.
What advice would you give to architecture students and young practitioners?
To go like to understand that very often the situation that you are in, if it's not favorable or if it seems difficult, it might have more to do with the place than with you. So to understand, I guess this is a very particular angle with London, understand that certain places where you might finish your study might not be the best place to begin practicing. And it's not your problem. It's not your fault. It's the place is difficult. The place has a lot of pressure, and it takes a long time to begin to get projects, if that's what you want to do, or to find the right practice. So look further, and also don't try to look too hard for the thing you're interested in. There is no one thing you're interested in. and there is no way of finding it. It will come at you randomly through life. So just keep doing the things that feel right, stay away from the things that feel wrong, and stay away by looking more broadly at what your opportunities are and the different places in which you can, where you can go to, where you can move to, and really change things massively. So don't feel too restrained to a particular place, and don't think it is your fault, because often it's just the context is so straining that it might put you down, and just moving to another place might really change everything. So look more broadly at the world.
That way of looking at things is nothing against then finding the motivation to really want to do something. But when that happens and you have a moment when you want to go out in the street to share what you believe, the street being the actual street or a metaphorical street or a public realm where you share what you believe in, then do it with as much doubt as you can afford.